Hello again, everybody. Today's reading is from The Art of Possibility, Transforming Professional and Personal Life by Rosamund Zander and Benjamin Zander. And Benjamin is, or at least was at the time of this writing, the conductor of the Boston Philharmonic. And Rosamund is just genius at creating innovative paradigms for personal and professional fulfillment. The Art of Possibility. This reading is called The High Wire Act. Mendelssohn's Italian Symphony starts off as though the music is making a joyful sprint towards a double handspring that catapults it to the highest trapeze. Mendelssohn gives the winds 11 quick steps before the violin makes their first energetic somersault. But in one concert, while I was pointing to the winds, a single violinist came in with an exuberance and gusto after just 5 steps. It was the kind of confident violin playing you can't help admiring. But it left us out there in space, no trapeze within our grasp. For the first time in my conducting career, I stopped a performance in front of more than 1,000 people. I smiled to the orchestra and said to myself, "How fascinating," and began the piece again. This time, of course, there was no mishap. Afterward, someone with the orchestra asked me in a hushed voice, "Would you like to know who came in early in the Mendelssohn?" Whether it was the slightly conspiratorial nature of the question that put me off, or whether it was that such a question was in disturbing contrast with the spiritedness of the music that we had just performed, I found myself saying no abruptly and then adding, "I did it." Not literally, of course. I didn't actually play the violin. But in that moment, in the context of the great music we had just made, it seemed absurd to me to consider handing out blame. It could only divide us. And for what? Certainly the player would never again come in early in the Italian Symphony, not perhaps from this time on make the mistake of a premature entrance in any performance. And I myself would know to be especially careful in guiding the orchestra through those 11 steps whenever I conducted that passage again. There was absolutely no gain to blaming anyone, and a real cost in terms of the blow to our integrity as a group. Sorry, my battery's getting low. Besides, I know full well that every time I step onto a podium, I take a risk that things won't turn out exactly as I anticipated them in my ear, but then there is a good music making without such risk taking. There is no great music making without such risk taking. I think in retrospect that my I did it response represented even more than that. I was saying that I was willing to be responsible for everything that happened in my orchestra. In fact, I felt enormously empowered and liberated by doing so. The type of responsibility we are most familiar with is the sort that we apportion to ourselves and others. Dividing obligations helps us keep life organized and manageable. As for example, I'll be responsible for making the kids' lunches if you feed them breakfast. Or, it wasn't all my fault that our check bounced. You forgot to enter other checks in our ledger. We often use reward and punishment to regulate accountability. The carrot and stick, the bonus at the end of a successful year, the threat of being fired. Approval and disapproval are also strong motivating factors, which rely for their effectiveness on the individual's desire to be included and to do well within the community. Because the model is based on the assumption that life will be under control if everyone plays his part, when things do break down, someone or something naturally gets blamed. Apportioning blame works well enough to keep order in relatively homogeneous community that boasts community accepted values and where everyone is enrolled in playing his part. It appeals to our instinctive sense of fairness. However, its effectiveness is likely to be circumscribed in communities of divergent cultures and widely varied resources. It is at this point, when everything else has failed, that you might find it useful to pull out this new game, the game of being the board. And I continue on. Just a moment. In our practice of being the board, however, you'll define yourself not as a piece nor as the strategist, but as the board itself, the framework for the game of life around you. The purpose of naming yourself as the board, or as the context in which life occurs to you, is to give yourself the power to transform your experience of any unwanted condition into one that which you care to live. When you identify yourself as a single chess piece in the game of chess, and by analogy, as an individual in a particular role, you can only react to, complain about, or resist the moves that interrupted your plans. But if you name yourself as the board itself, you can turn all your attention to what you want to see happen, with none paid to what you need to win or fight or fix. The action in this graceful game is ongoing integration. One by one, you bring everything you have been resisting into the fold. You, as the board, make room for all the moves. Thank you for your listening.